One of the questions we get asked the very most is, do you have a therapist you can recommend for me? And while we wish that we knew of therapists in every single place, in every single part of the country, we don't. So what do we tell them instead, Mel?
We say check out BetterHelp because it's online, it's at a reasonable price, and you can be matched with a therapist within 24 hours. I've also used them and they have been great. And if you don't like your therapist, guess what? Click, and get a new one.
Absolutely. It's so hard when you have an in-person therapist, if you're not clicking with them, to cut them off and get a new one. So that's not an issue with BetterHelp. So we always tell people to try BetterHelp. And if you use our promo code, which is
trybetterhelp.com/WWDN,
you get 10% off your first month.
Go ahead and try it out. That's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN. And you know what? I'm a big fan of doing therapy where you don't have to wear pants, but nobody knows about it.
Are you wearing pants right now, Mel?
I'll see you later. Bye. That's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN.
I can already tell we're going to have a fun interview, Mel.
I know, me too.
I'm kind of excited.
So am I.
Yes.
Okay, excited person, who are you? Tell us.
I'm Molly Peacock, and I'm a poet and a biographer and a widow.
Oh, that's like the trifecta of things, I think. Molly, where do you live?
I live in Toronto.
Oh,
I'm a dual citizen of the U.S. and Canada, and I had one Canadian grandmother, one American grandmother, and I'm very binational.
so where did you grow up?
I grew up outside of Buffalo, which is right on the border. And then, but I went to, I went to school, I went to college in the US, I went to Binghamton University in upstate New York, and then I lived for quite a number of years in New York City, where I know you also have been. And there I discovered myself as a poet and was very lucky to co-create Poetry in Motion on the New York City buses and subways. So
Oh,
now when you took the subway, you might have seen the poems. So that's who I am.
she's like actual royalty, Mel.
I know, you've got to have a lot of really great stories.
I do have good stories, I have to say.
I feel like a lot of people think that they're poets. Not think, they are poets, but you like actually created a successful career around poetry. I feel like that's pretty rare. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
Okay.
It is pretty rare, and I'm pretty lucky. And if I'd have ever said to my mother, Mom, I'm going to grow up to be a poet, I'm going to try to make my living as a poet, I would have had to call an ambulance for her. That would have definitely been an emergency room situation. And I didn't think that that was going to happen to me. I wrote, but I didn't know. I had a lot of questions about whether I was good enough. You meet these like guys at university and they'd come up to you and say, Hi, I'm a poet, and I would think, I'm never saying that to anyone. And it really took years, and it took me starting to publish in teeny tiny literary zines, and then finally I sort of worked up to it. I went to an art colony. I got in. I was amazed.
A colony?
Yes,
I don't
What
know.
is
art
that?
colony, the MacDowell colony. There are a number of artist colonies.
You should see both Mel and my eyes are big and wide because this is a completely new concept for us.
Yeah, because I don't know about musician colonies, and so even as someone in the arts, this is very fascinating. What is it?
Oh my gosh. It are artist colonies. Well, the two big ones in the United States, the MacDowell Colony and Yaddo, were both started by women in the early in the early part of the 20th century. And Marion McDowell, who started the McDowell Colony, was the wife of a composer, a musical composer, Edmund McDowell.
Oh yeah, I know that name.
Yes, you know that name. I mean, we probably don't know too much else. He wrote something called To a Wild Rose.
Yeah.
So she felt like he never had enough time to write his music. So she bought this farm for them in the wilds of New Hampshire at that point.
Like literally
And
bought a farm, not
yeah,
bought the
like
farm.
literally
Yeah.
bought a farm, not figuratively as widows joke about their husbands buying the farm. And she built a little cabin for him. And then they invited their friends, and he died. And then she was a widow with his musical manuscripts, his friends, her ideas, and she expanded this idea of the artist colony and the McDowell colony. I don't know how many individual cabins there are, but it's on several hundred acres in New Hampshire, and they invite uh, poets, filmmakers, composers, nonfiction writers, novelists, all kinds of artists go there. Painters, certainly, printmakers, uh, all of the artists, not the performing arts, but the generating arts. And I mean, the performing arts need studios and different kinds of space. These are wonderful secret little cabins, all situated so from each cabin, you can't see anybody else. You're just there by yourself.
I want to
And
go there.
I know. I was
it's,
hoping that you can
yes.
get an invite, Mel, because out of the two of us, you're the only chance we
I
got.
mean, surely there's got to be a podcaster
Yeah.
colony out there. I mean, somewhere there's somebody.
That's called a cult, Molly.
I mean, podcasting is an art. It's an art, you guys. You know that. So
Listen, I'm a composer. Anita, you can write lyrics. You can't.
No.
Would that count because it's generative art if you're composing? But then somebody would be performing it. So I don't know. How can we get in?
well, I think I'm going to send you a link right after we stop speaking, and then but I mean there are lots, and the other famous one is in upstate New York, in Saratoga Springs, called
Wow.
Yaddo, also started uh, by a woman. In this case, after both of her children passed away,
What is
and
it's like death and pain creates art. Like,
And it's true because you're thinking about legacy, you're
mm,
thinking about memorial. And I mean, that's what poetry, I think that's one of the big sources of poetry is memorializing someone.
yeah.
It's also the source of biography. That's how, written biographies, biography got started with funeral orations, ancient
Oh.
funeral orations. And I do both of these things. I'm a biographer and a poet, and I think I it wasn't until it actually wasn't until my husband passed away that I began thinking that I've spent a lifetime engaged in memorializing people and events and their lives. And I just never thought of it that way.
Did you meet your husband at music camp?
Poet camp?
No, no,
Poet
no.
camp?
I met my
Artist camp.
husband. I first saw my late husband. He was in the English class across the hall in junior high.
What?
Oh,
What?
that's
Yes.
So
adorable.
he probably had like acne and he was
And he
awkward.
was one of those, maybe one of your kids does this. I don't know. He's one of those boys who couldn't really sit still in his desk.
Mm-hmm.
And so his leg would be going like 50 miles an hour.
Like a
I mean,
rabbit.
sitting there like a rabbit, like a dreaming dog, more. And so I noticed him there. we didn't actually speak to one another until we were in high school. We went to the same high school, and we were in the same English classes. And then finally, he asked me out after our junior carnival, and that was it. We went to the junior prom, we went to the senior prom, we lasted through our first year of college, but our universities were far away from each other, and I was too immature for a commuter relationship. So I broke up with him.
You broke his heart, but then you came back
19
to
years
him.
ago. I didn't break it that far because he started dating a friend of
Oh,
ours like only about 3 months afterwards. So I thought, well,
he's
um,
fine.
he's fine. 19 years went by, and uh, I I became a poet, and I had published my second book. I was really lucky with my second book. It got reviewed in the New York Times. And he, meanwhile, used to be a math major, but he had changed his major and had become something very obscure but very wonderful. He had become a literary scholar specializing in James
What?
Joyce's Ulysses.
That's very specific.
Very
It's
specific.
very, very specific,
And
and he became in this really teeny tiny niche area that not too many other people think about. He became an expert. But James Joyce's Ulysses was considered by many people to be the novel of the 20th century, and many people still study it and read it, etc. So in this area, there he was, and his former girlfriend showed up at a poetry reading of mine and said very coyly, "I think we have someone in common." And I said, "Well, who is it?" And she said, "Michael Groden." And I went crazy. I said, "Oh my God." I said, "I remember the smell of his mother's laundry detergent because his shirt, because of course she was the one who washed his shirts in high school, and we would dance and my nose would be pressed into his shoulder. And so I go on and on about the laundry detergent, and I'm watching her face start to change, and I think, I must be trespassing here somehow. And then I realized that they had dated, but I didn't care. I wrote my address down on a scrap of paper, and I said, "Can you give him my address?" And she said, "Oh no, I couldn't possibly." She said, "I'm on my way to Paris." And it was
Of
true. There
course.
was her suitcase. She had a suitcase with her. I thought, oh, well, okay. But she did. She put it in an envelope. She sent him my address. And he, meanwhile, was reading that review in the New York Times. And he was about to write to me at my publisher. And that's how we reconnected.
What year
But,
was this?
oh my gosh, 1984. Really long time. I mean, I'm ancient. I know that this is
You're a
not a
spring chicken.
podcast for ancient people, but I am younger than your grandfather. So.
how come you didn't give him your phone number? Because you had phones in the 80s. We know
Yes, we
this.
did have fun. We did have phones, and I don't know why I didn't give him my phone number because
They're writers.
Yeah, you guys are
still
poets.
because I'm a writer, and it was still like an era of writing to people. I mean, because he didn't think about calling me either. We wrote to each other. I know this is it's so retro. I almost feel like I'm living in another century.
Well, you
But
are.
I think it's really cool because it's true. I remember, Anita, do you remember when you were younger, like sending letters to your
Oh,
cousins or friends?
it
Like,
was so cool when you got a letter in the mail, and then you
yeah,
could get a pen pal. Once I paid
yes.
$2 to get a pen pal, and
Wow.
I sent her a piece of gum in the mail, and she never responded. And do you
Oh,
know, I still am mad about that because gum was very precious to me when I was in whatever grade I was in.
Wow. Yeah. So no shade to the letter giving your address. I just was curious why, because we're so used to phones now.
Well, I know phones and or just text somebody or just email them.
Yeah.
Um, but I had pen pals too, and we didn't have to back in the day. We didn't have to pay for $2 for a pen pal. Your teacher assigned you. That's how I got mine. But I didn't find that the pen pals lasted very long. Nobody sent me any gum.
Yeah, you did. If you send gum, it's over.
Yeah.
So for 19 years, neither of you had ended up in a committed relationship at the time that
We
this
did
address
though.
exchange.
Oh,
I mean,
Really?
we married other people in the same year. We
What?
divorced
oh,
the
wow.
other people in the same year, and we were sort of free. I mean, we were both were in other relationships, but they weren't live-in or they were committed, but not sort of traditional
Yeah.
family type relationships. And so we started talking to one another on the phone. Somewhere in that talking on the phone, Mike decided to come to New York, where I was teaching seventh grade, and he was a marathon runner. And so he was coming in to run the marathon, and we agreed to meet. And this former girlfriend of his told me that he had had cancer. I I was sort of clueless about that in the 1980s, 1984. I didn't really know what that meant, but I thought, could he, I mean, is he dying now? So when he wanted to meet, I made an elaborate arrangement to meet, thinking this could be the last time I'm going to see him. I didn't know that. I mean, he had by that time was almost had passed his 5 year mark cancer free. But I didn't really get it. I just wasn't sure. So we met and he never mentioned it. We had coffee and we were sitting outside in a cafe, on a sidewalk cafe, and all he said was, "Oh, could we move into the shade?" Because what he'd had was he'd had melanoma skin cancer. That's the bad kind of skin cancer. And after this, I'm like waiting for him to say something. He doesn't say anything. I don't have the social skills to bring it up. So I don't bring it up. And then we both go off, and I think, ah, this could have been our only chance to talk to one another, and it wasn't about anything deep and profound. It was about what he was doing, what I was doing, blah, blah, blah. And so I wrote a poem about it. And it was published. I'm really proud. I sent it to the Paris Review. I thought this is a good poem, and I want it to be in a wonderful place. And when the Paris Review came out, then I sent it to him. And that's when we really started talking about, I mean, look, about love and death. And love and death has, circulated around our relationship, and we were involved with other people. We kind of developed a grown-up friendship. And then finally, when we were 45, um, my relationship exploded. Uh, and his relationship, he was a very calm person, so his relationship calmly broke up. Um, and then he asked me to visit him in Canada, and I said yes. And I got off the plane. And that was the first time we physically touched when I got off the plane, because I threw my arms around him in the airport.
Did he still smell like that kind of laundry soap?
I have to say, he's it was a really hot, unair
Oh
conditioned
no.
day. So we got a really good whiff of each other's basic smells with that hug. And so, and I thought, I can't believe that this has been going on so long. I mean, that finally, this contact is made. And I mean, obviously he thought that too. And, before the year was out, we were married.
It sounds kind of like a screenplay. Like it sounds like a movie, like
Yeah. Parallel separate lives.
I'm so privileged that I have a story that feels like a movie.
so I'm curious if either of you had children before you got married to each other.
No,
And then did
no,
you have children once you were with each other?
no, we did
Okay.
not.
And how long were you married?
28 years.
28 years.
Yeah.
And did the melanoma come back?
Oh, yes. There were
Oh,
Oh,
many,
no.
many recurrences.
okay. So this was kind
Um,
of like part of your
it was
life.
absolutely part of our lives.
Mm.
And we learned how to live on two tracks. We had a death track, where there would be a recurrence, or there'd be, something where, other people could get life insurance, but he couldn't. I just all of those sorts of things that happen on the death track, the illness and death track. And then we had the life track where he was thriving in his career. He wrote books, he taught. Um, we because of his work, we went to Ireland and England. Because of his influence, I started writing memoir and biographies, looking at the shapes of other people's lives and getting the courage to do research. I don't have a PhD, but I wrote two books about two women artists' lives. And he started writing a scholar's memoir because we influenced one another's work. And we were in sync. After a while, I mean, I had a little apartment in New York, and he had a house in London, Ontario, where he was teaching, and we decided we would give both of those up, and we would live in an apartment in Toronto, and that was a big move for us, but we couldn't afford a super big apartment, so we found a place that was, had a layout where he could have his office, um, and I could have mine, and we would be writing and doing our work, and then the kitchen and the living room were in the middle, and so we would meet. We didn't eat breakfast or lunch together, even though we lived in the same place, but we would bump into each other in the kitchen, and then and I but I always made dinner. We always had dinner together, and it was an incredible coziness about it and a valuing because this was all happening as there were intermittent cancer recurrences and they got closer together. At first, they'd be about every 6 years, but then in the last 6 years of his life, there was a lot, and there was a drug trial, and there was just a lot of hospital stuff. It was hard to be just a wife in all that because there's an aspect of caregiving. Yes, you're a wife, and you're also a parent. You're also a nurse. You're a caregiver. And he was so independent and taught an online class 2 weeks before he passed away. He was a runner his whole life. He ran just a few blocks, but he ran probably 6 weeks before he died. He was in many ways, he showed me how to live with all this. You know, he'd have a cancer recurrence, and I would say, "Oh my God, we should cancel this, we should cancel that," and he would say, "No, let's not cancel anything unless we have to." And it was so rare that we canceled things. I mean, it was we'd make commitments, and somehow or another we'd find a way to make the commitment. And looking back, it amazes me.
Molly, I have a question for you because anything creative or that requires something with your brain making things, that's sometimes hard to get into the routine of or the flow of.
Mm.
So, how was that for both of you during these? You'd have your life track and your death track.
I'm so incredibly grateful that writing a poem lets you go into that space. If you say, and I say this to people all the time, you know, you feel like your creative life needs hours and hours and hours of time. You feel like your creative life needs like a meadow that you're going to roll around in. And I want that for my creative life. And I have that as a widow, by the way, for the first time in many years. And I treasure it. I treasure that meadow of time. I really do. But I I also know that when you don't have it and when you've got a lot of obligations, you can keep that thing in your head. I could take that poem with me. I could be in a waiting room and read that poem, not, you know, get out my phone and scroll through some swamp of email that I had. Um, it's a matter of saying, okay, I have this, I'm doing this, I am reserving room in my brain for this no matter what. Because if you don't do that and you're a creative person, something in you dies.
Mhm.
You too, you will start dying. And I did not want to be the kind of wife who dies immediately after her husband because my caregiving took so much out of me that I became sick. And I knew women like that. And and there was a fierceness in me. I thought, I am not going to become a person like that. I have to have something for myself. As selfish as quote unquote selfish as that is, it's the oxygen mask philosophy of life. You've got to put your own oxygen mask on first. Just have to reserve that time. And I'm telling you, I'm fierce about it. Just absolutely, just as fiercely protective as I could possibly be uh, of that time, because if you have a gift, you have to take care of it. And if you don't take care of it, something in you is going to shrivel horribly. And then you're not any good to anyone if that happens.
So when did he end up passing away?
We're coming up on 4 years in 2021.
Very pleasant time on this earth.
Yes, March 25th, 2021. I wasn't sure how to process it. I knew, of course, he was going to die, but you don't feel it until it happens. I mean, I was processing a lot of grief, but it's not the same as coming home from that hospital and knowing that he was absolutely and utterly gone. And I was shocked at the degree of relief I felt. And I cried for 28 days straight. And it only occurred to me later. I thought, oh my gosh, we've been married for 28 years, and somehow I cried for 28 days. We've been married for 28 years. And then on the 29th day, I didn't realize it, but I stopped. I didn't cry because I would ask myself, are you going to keep doing this? Are you going to like cry every day for the rest of your life? Is this gonna, is it, this going to end? Uh, um, and it might have taken me a couple of days to realize, oh, something shifted. And that's when I started writing poems about his death and my new feelings as a widow.
So, will you tell us what the name of your book of poetry that you wrote about your widow experience?
Yes, it's called The Widow's Crayon Box.
That sounds fun.
It is sort of fun.
I love the name of this because Mel and I have discussed this, that there is this idea of what a widow should be, should look like, should act like. And for me, the idea that I have in my mind is black. Like
Yes,
no color, devoid of color. You're supposed to wear your black, you're supposed to wear your veil, you're supposed to be quiet. You're supposed to cry, but you're not supposed to do anything that would get in the way of anybody else, things like that. You're kind of supposed to be sad and over there. So the widow's crayon box is kind of taking that and just chucking it out the door.
that's exactly right. I mean, I have the same idea as you. I think that so many of us have like, I'm supposed to be quietly sobbing at the end of the couch in my bathrobe. And, and I mean, who has time to do that, first of all? And second of all, uh, um, I was feeling things so strongly, and so many things were happening to me, like internally as well as externally. I, when I started writing, I thought, this isn't just the basic eight primary colors of the little kids Crayola box. I am experiencing the entire 152 colors of the giant Crayola box. And I never wrote a book of poems with a premise before, but I thought that's my premise. I I've got this crayon box and just you know how primitive crayons are. I mean, like you can't even they come with a little sharpener, but really, I mean, it's so hard to it's 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 hard to use crayons to create visual art. But I felt like it was both primitive and full of color and full of an attempt, and also because widowhood was so fresh, I'd never experienced anything like it. It brought me back to my girlhood
Mm.
and brought me back to my crayons. And also, in the really positive sense, a sense of play that you get to have when you are free. I I had no serious obligations for the first time in decades. And wow, that that almost this almost childhood freedom that I felt, it was incredible to me.
Do you think that's because the death and grief, it almost like burns you down to the core of your being and you can look at things from a different perspective? Is that why?
You know, there um I've looked for the source of this quote, and I was told it was from American writer and philosopher, 19th century thinker, Ralph Waldo Emerson. But I actually asked an Emerson scholar if about this quote. And he said, "Well, I can't find it." So I don't know if he's the source, but that burning thing, um, he talked about after a parent dies. He was talking about after his father died. He had an image of of a field that had been where the trees had been felled. A giant tree had been felled, and there was a burn off of all of the growth. And then how things almost immediately started growing back. And how those that foliage couldn't have grown back if it had been shaded by that tree.
Mhm.
And there's this weird freedom in that sunlight for all those little seeds that would never have sprouted in the shade to suddenly start sprouting. And that's what happens too. And that amazed me. It's like it's the weird gift of widowhood is that there is that quality.
Yeah. It's like a forest fire,
Yep.
They
Yes.
talk about how that's a natural part of the cycle because otherwise things can't grow. And you're also like, but I don't want to live through a forest fire,
No.
please and thank you.
And then you maybe discover a new variety of plant, and it never would have happened if the forest fire hadn't
Yeah.
happened. And so it's this gift that you never asked for, that you never, knew that you could appreciate in some strange way. It is weird. It is the weirdest thing. Just even explaining this kind of thing to people.
It's really hard to explain to people. And also it feels like, oh, you mean you're not sobbing at the end of the couch? And like, does that mean you didn't love the guy?
Hmm.
It doesn't. You can be grieving and be happy at the same time.
Yes.
It, those
Weird.
they don't cancel each other out.
Yeah.
You
Or
hold them in yourself at the same time.
the other thing that bothers me is that if you say, "Oh my goodness, this would like I would never have learned this thing or whatever," then people are really quick to hop on it and be like, "Oh yeah, see how it was a blessing," and they try and like give you all the
Uh,
positives from it too, and you're
yes.
like, "No, like
No.
not that. Like
No.
yes, I was happy about that thing, but stop trying to pile those onto me and so it makes it like it wasn't a big deal at all. Like this is still a really big deal."
It is a big deal. And when people say, "Oh, well, it happened for a reason," um,
Boo.
boo. Um, it's a kind of erasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no, 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 no. You're living all the colors of the crayon box all at once.
And you cannot erase crayons. This I know. And also,
Yes, as everyone with children who have written on their walls
no.
understand.
And also, I'm going to tell you a little secret. They don't taste very good. I have eaten so many crayons in my life as a child because they're so colorful and they're so pretty and they look like they should taste good and they don't.
Did you eat glitter crayons too?
No, but I like tested them more than was probably reasonable. Like that looks good. I'll give it a chew. And then it's just
Sure.
like trying to get the wax.
It's funny that you're the one of you and Jason that's alive. No offense.
This is true.
It's true though. Like with back to the widowhood, I guess people think that it's like a condition, and I guess before I went through this, I would have thought that, oh well, once you're a widow, your life is over. Like you're done. Like you will also die. So I love that you were resolved to not be that, because and nobody listening can see what we're seeing right now because we're we see Molly through the computer. She's not in black and stoic, and you have like beautiful colors on, and she's so full of joy and love, and that also comes with a price that comes from the dark times
Yeah.
that you've been through as well.
Yes. And that you can feel simultaneously. Very, very young children feel maybe one thing at one time. I mean, fear or thrill or worry or satisfaction. But grown-ups, it's a condition of adulthood that we feel more than one thing at one time. And to
Yeah.
constantly boil it down and say, "Oh, well, this is the thing." That's it's not. It's that there's a multitude of feelings that we have.
I think that's important too. Like I have some friends that have gone through some hard things recently. They haven't been on the spouse death spectrum, but
Mhm.
there are things that have brought that duality into their life, and they're always surprised, like I was when my husband died, that those things can live together. So I think it's a really important thing to talk about because I don't know, maybe death brings us, and death and trauma and tragedy brings us into a more real world. You know, I didn't think about that when you're a kid, you only hold one emotion at a time. But yeah, it's more like kind of an infantilized way of experiencing emotion, perhaps.
I never felt more alive than when I was a new widow.
Oh, interesting.
I, ne I everything was so sharp to me. My all my experiences were so clear and so utterly alive. I mean, not everyone has that reaction. This is a strange thing to say. I would only say it to you too, and I hope it's not misinterpreted.
Don't tell anybody
I
else, Mel.
Do I
Okay.
need to cut this out?
Well, we'll see.
Okay.
I almost miss that stage of grief. I mean, 4 years out, I'm stronger, I'm calmer, I'm not experiencing everything as absolutely new and absolutely overwhelming. But the newness of it was breathtakingly fresh.
Yeah.
And and I don't miss the depths of my sadness, but I do miss that freshness. I mean, I don't think I won't be there again emotionally. That was just the time out of time that you experience just after a much loved person dies.
I
It
don't
just,
think it's crazy for you to say that. I think like on the surface, you might think, oh no, like I don't want to ever experience that again. But there is something to be said about the volume and the acuity of that feeling. And it means your person was just here. And it's also like, I'm showing that it was so painful because I loved them so much. And as that kind of dampens as time goes on, there is kind of this sense of, I don't know, that they're further away and you're not still
yes,
showing that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
there is a loss in the fact that it's been so long since they've been
Yeah.
gone as well. So yeah,
That's true,
I can see that, but it's also like, no, I don't want to do that again ever.
No, I don't. I don't. I really don't want to do that again. The layers of loss go on. How long has it been for you?
Six,
6
6 years.
years?
Yeah.
7 for me.
And seven for Mel. Okay, so and I wonder about how it feels to you to continue this podcast. I mean, you've done, I mean, gosh, over 200 episodes. The I
We
don't
don't
know
know
what the
either.
number is. And now as I'm approaching the fourth anniversary, there's a weird loss of the sharpness of the memory of him. That's like these layers of loss peel off, also in ways I didn't expect.
Yeah, we've had that discussion before because it has been a significant amount of time since we started the podcast, and the thing that motivated us to start it was we had all this stuff to say or to talk about, or people that we wanted to learn about their experiences with, and then as it kind of hits that four-year mark, that's probably about when we talked about it. It's like, okay, that our experiences are not in the early grief anymore. Our experiences are
Mhm.
wherever they are. So it is coming from a perspective that we haven't been in before, but it's also not as raw as before. And
Yes.
so it's like, can you relate still to that fresh time where
Yeah.
everything was so vibrant and horrifying, and also you felt some of the beauty of it too? Kind of like we have to do a check every now and then, see like, is this actually helping people still?
Yeah. Whenever we have a discussion with a new widow or somebody who is in that fresh stage, we have to open ourselves back up to that a little bit, in order to relate. I sometimes think about it as like a Superman situation. That sounds so weird, but let me explain further. It's like we don't wear our widowhood on the outside of our clothes anymore, but we
Yeah.
always have that on the inside. And so when we
Yeah.
go into, either a podcast or speaking with widows or just, reacting or responding to somebody who's just had loss, it's like you have to access that again. You have to pull out the Superman clothes again, the widow woman
Yes.
clothes or whatever, to be able to respond appropriately and to remember what you needed at that point in time. And so it can be sometimes hard in an emotional sense to do that. And it can also be hard in actually trying to make yourself go there again. So,
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, with you two, you you have to do that with each conversation, with each podcast. And that's a really interesting emotional back and forth for
mhm.
you guys. I'm going to read you a poem.
I was hoping that was going to
Good.
happen.
And I'm going to read you. I think we don't have time for more than one, so I'm going to read you the last poem in the book, and it's
Fantastic.
called Honey Crisp, and
Oh,
it's
wait.
about
Anita
Is it
loves
about
Honeycrisp
apples?
apples.
oh.
I love apples. Okay, go.
Okay. So my late husband ate an apple every day, and there was an apple left in the refrigerator. And I took a chance. Uh, this poem could have been a disaster because it's about a I'm talking to the apple. And the apple, I couldn't throw it out, just FYI. So I'm talking to the apple, and at the very end, I use the word pomme, Pomme, which is French for apple. Just a little Canadian bilingual thing that goes on in the end. Honey Crisp. Hello, wizen face. Hello, apple. Understudy in the fridge since March. It's September. Hello, wrinkly red cheeks. I'll bet you're almost a year old. Born last autumn. Kept in the fruit storage built half underground on the farm. Then in the snow sold to me. Hello, my honey crisp. Well, my honey, no longer crisp. Are you asking why you haven't been eaten by now? Because that man hewed to his routines. An apple for lunch every day, the same red punctuation. You were earmarked for the date. He slipped from my arms, and we both slid to the floor. Red Angel, are you listening? 911, hospital, hospice, and 10 days later, you were about 6 months old then. He died and was carried to a cold shelf. Hello, smiley stem. Hello, days moving you from spot to spot. Hello, week where I forgot and left you at the back and went about my new life. Greetings, new groceries. Their jumble causes a rearrangement of your bin. So I have to pick you up. Would you rather have been eaten and lived on as energy? Not yet. Not yet, my pum. Hello, soft, wrinkled face in my palms. Honey Crisp.
Anita's crying.
The best
Yeah.
compliment a poet can have is that silence after you read the poem. And when someone tells me that they cried, I feel like, oh, good. It was a success. I said it.
If you could get Anita to cry, I've seen her cry twice, and this is one of them.
That's not, it's been more than that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Um, Molly, thank you for sharing your I have a special love of apples too, and so that, you know, gets me more than maybe a normal person. Tell us where people can find your book of poems.
Well, I am very, very proud to be published by W. Norton and Company. So the Widow's Crayon Box is available anywhere books are sold. It's certainly available uh, online and at various independent bookstores, and certainly on Amazon. It's pretty much available everywhere. And
This is
uh,
fantastic.
yeah,
Do you have a website of your own?
I do. I do. And it's really beautiful. It's www.mollypeacock.org.
Oh, she's an organization.
It's a long text story about the .com. So why not become an org?
I'm just also thinking how it's kind of perfect that your last name is Peacock because a peacock feather is full of all of the colors as well. So,
I love it. I'm as a child, I wasn't so sure about having a noun on a bird for my last name, but I grew into it, and I'm so happy. It's a wonderful legacy.
So I'm looking on your site and it looks like you have events. Is that
I
correct?
do.
What kinds of events?
I do. Well, oh my goodness. So I have a buy the book, Mend a Broken Heart event coming up
Oh,
February 23rd online, sponsored by two bookstores, one in New York City and one in Toronto. So we've got a United States bookstore and a Canadian bookstore sponsoring a reading of three different poets for the end of National Mend a Broken Heart Month. Did you know February was National Mend a Broken Heart Month?
nope,
Well,
no.
it is, and we are reading, and I think I'll probably read that very poem among others for February 23rd, which is a Sunday afternoon, and it's at 3 o'clock Eastern time, which would be 2 o'clock Central, 1 o'clock Mountain, noon Pacific time.
we'll link to your site as well in the show notes. And yeah, please check out Molly's book, The Widow's Crayon Box.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Molly. I have to be honest, when we scheduled with you, we had a little snafu. And then before we were gonna, meet with you, sometimes you think of artists as being kind of stodgy and like very highbrow and only wanting to use very big words.
Wearing berets.
Yes, and houndstooth patterns with the elbows. So it's been a delight to talk to you and just speak to somebody who's so full of life and energy and fun while also being so talented and
I
something. I don't
it's
know.
it's an honor to talk to both of you. I love your podcast because you're so upbeat. It's so wide ranging. I mean, I get to hear about insurance, and then I get to hear about spirituality, everything. You cover everything. And for me, going through all my stages of widowhood, uh, it's a wonderful companion.
Thank you
Thank,
so
thank
much.
you.
We hope everybody listening has enjoyed listening to Molly's story and go check out her book. If you would like to keep the podcast going, will you check out our Patreon? It's patreon.com/WWDN.
If you'd like to buy us tacos, go to buymeacoffee.com/widow we do now.
We always are grateful for nice ratings and reviews. It really helps widows to find us when they need to find us. So thank you. All right. Thank you for joining us. Until we get to talk to you again, I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
I'm Molly Peacock.
And we're just two young widows and one widow who is the best box of crayons that a child could ever get. And we're all just trying to figure out widow.
We
Do.
now.
Mel,
Yeah,
we have a major announcement to make.
go for it.
Did you know that right now all plans on Mint Mobile are what?
$15 a month.
Okay, that's truly ridiculous. Do you know how much regular cell phones are?
Yep.
$1 bazillion a month. 15 is less than that.
New customers get 3 months of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month if you sign up right now. And guess what? I use it. I love it. I've used it all over the country, all over the world, and it's great. And if you're wondering about phones, they have those available as well, or you can just port your own number and your current phone over to Mint Mobile. They make it so easy.
So if people are interested in trying out Mint Mobile, how can they go about doing that?
Go to trymintmobile.com/WWDN. And you know, it's interesting. When my dad died, we actually put his phone on a Mint Mobile plan because it kept his number going, but it was $15 a month. So there you go. And there's different storage plans, but you might as well just get the unlimited because it's $15 a month.
Absolutely. All right, go try it today.
That's trymintmobile.com/WWDN.